My three takeaways from the Monaco Grand Prix. The first one has to be Charles Leclerc finally gets a win at home. And you need to understand just how much it means to a race car driver to win their home race. It means everything. It's right up there with winning a championship. And now, when we look at this championship, it's a lot closer, isn't it? I know everyone's going to give me a hard time about, Max is going to win this thing and Red Bull's going to run away with it. I don't necessarily see it that way, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But first of all, the championship battle between Max and Charles, it's whittling down to 31 points. And as we get deeper into this season, who knows? We may just see a drivers' championship battle, but I digress. Let's get into point number 2, the opening lap, the collisions between Sergio Perez, Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg ends up being a victim in all of that. When I take a look at this incident, I have to issue the blame towards Kevin Magnussen. I understand there's a bit of a gap there, but you're the trailing car. And even though there is a bit of a gap there, he should already know that you can't pass there. It is impossible. These cars are way too big to pull off a maneuver there. And if I'm Sergio Perez, I am going to do the exact same thing that he does, where he starts to move over on K-Mag just to dissuade him from even having a thought about putting the car there. So, in my opinion, it's Kevin Magnussen's got to back off just a bit and then try and get Sergio either a little later in the lap or later on in the race. It was a long Grand Prix. Didn't need to just throw it down or throw it around the outside right off the opening lap like that. Kevin Magnussen is in a contract year. Haas is already saying goodbye to Nico Hülkenberg. He's off to Sauber for next year. I think Ollie Behrman is going to come in and replace Nico Hülkenberg. And for Io Komatsu, team principal at Haas, he has a lot of decisions to make when it comes down to whether or not he's going to bring Kevin Magnussen back to the team. A little bit later in this lap, we get another incident. And this one was between Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, the two teammates down at Alpine. Again, both of these drivers, contract years for them as well. Now, Esteban Ocon did go onto Twitter, accepts full responsibility for this collision. I don't necessarily see it that way. There was a bit of a gap there. I think Pierre may have been able to give Esteban a tiny bit of racing room and maybe see how it plays out between the two of them as they come out of the tunnel, and then see if Gasly could have gotten him at that moment or taken the position back at that moment. Now, I can understand that Bruno Famin is extremely upset about the entire situation. He said, quote, Esteban's attack was completely out of line. It's exactly what we didn't want to see, and there will be circumstances we're going to make a tough decision. Now, I understand he's extremely upset by what Esteban had done, but again, I'm going to revert back to what I said at the beginning of this point, where there's a gap there. It is big enough. You can actually make a maneuver in that spot, unlike what happened with Magnussen and Perez earlier in the lap. The only thing that I can think of why Esteban would put out a tweet like he had done is from the fact that they must have had a conversation between the two teammates and the team saying not to overtake each other or not to get into a battle with each other in this race, because there could potentially have been more points on the table for the team as a whole. Now, next up, we have the Canadian Grand Prix. So my third point has to be, is there a Constructors Championship battle brewing between Red Bull Racing, the Scuderia, so Ferrari, and McLaren? I think there is. And I especially think there is between Red Bull Racing and Ferrari. Currently, if we take a look at the championship constructors battle, 24 points. That's all that separates Red Bull Racing from Ferrari. We've seen a lot over these last few races. So if we go Miami, and we go Imola, now we go Monaco, we have seen that these other two teams, Ferrari, McLaren, they have closed that gap to Red Bull Racing. Granted, Imola, not really a track that suits Red Bull, and same goes with Monaco. I think this is probably the most difficult track on the calendar for Red Bull Racing. I think Monaco was, but as we get to Canada, again, Red Bull Racing is going to have to be, and Max Verstappen in particular, negotiating a lot of the bumps that are there. The track has been resurfaced in Canada, but the cars have to go over the sausage curbing. You have to launch the F1 car through the curbs, through the chicanes in Canada, and the Red Bull Racing machine doesn't really do that well. That's one of the reasons why the other two teams have closed that gap to Red Bull Racing in the Constructors' Championship. So, looking forward to Canada, I think we're going to have three teams, again, being in contention for race victories.